So here's a thought experiment. You wake up in a room into pitch blackness without any memory of how you got there. It's so black, you're not even sure it's a room. You could be in a coffin for all you know, or Kanye's closet or something. In fact, it's so black, you have a hard time being certain you're even awake. You blink twice, you blink 3 times, and the distinct shades of blackness you think you'd associate with blinking in the dark are just not there. You're not even sure what you're looking for. All you know is that you want out of that room. Somewhere inside the room, there's a key that will unlock a door, but you don't know that. And there's probably a Batman Lego somewhere on the floor too, so watch out for that. That's a visual metaphor for what ancient Greek philosophers dubbed Meno's paradox, or the learner's paradox, and it sprung fully formed from one of Plato's dialogues called Meno. What's the learner's paradox and what makes it a paradox? It's based on 3 premises. 1, if you know something, you don't need to learn it. 2, if you don't know something, you wouldn't even recognize that thing if you found it. And 3, therefore it's actually impossible to learn anything. In this visual metaphor, if you had the key in your possession or full knowledge, you wouldn't need to search for it. If you had zero idea what the key even looked like, complete ignorance, you wouldn't even recognize it if you touched it in the dark. But by feeling around the area and using the sense of touch, you might come to recognize the key when you find it and the door that it unlocks to successfully escape the room. Socrates' response to this paradox was to suggest that all knowledge is merely a recollection of ideas a person already knew, something he called anamnesis. Finding that key in the dark would be less of a realization that you obtained a quote-unquote key and that a key fits a lock to a door that you can open to escape, and it's more of a recollection, even if it felt like a realization in that moment. Okay, so here's another thought experiment. You walk into a gym and you have some idea of how you got there. There's people of various shapes and sizes grunting and sweating. There's these clinical rays of light reflecting off a variety of metal contraptions with various levers and pulleys, and you're not quite sure if these devices are supposed to facilitate some journey of self-help or self-destruction. All you know is that you want to make the most of your time there, and you're not exactly sure how. So the learner's paradox suggests if you already knew what to do, you held the keys, you wouldn't be struggling to start in the first place. If you have no clue what good gym and/or health and fitness habits look like, you might feel lost, intimidated, unsure of what to do, and just afraid of failing, whatever failing means to you at the time. But by trying different approaches, exploring the basics of nutrition, trying different kinds of workouts, and just listening to your mind-body, you'll eventually feel out what works for you and unlock the habit. And you'll essentially find those keys in the dark. If at least 1 and 2 sound familiar to you, this video is essentially for you. The paradox is only a small portion of Plato's famous dialogue. It's somewhat long by today's standards anyway, and a bit sinuous like most philosophical discussions, but unlike most philosophical discussions, it's not completely useless. Nonetheless, here's a very quick summary. Meno's, a philosopher trained by a sophist philosopher named Gorgios, is discussing the essence of the concept of virtue alongside Socrates. Now, those that know anything about Socrates know that he approaches philosophical discourse like someone asking you if you can tell them where Tolstoy in the local library is kept. Except they already know where War and Peace is, they just want to see if you knew, and they also want you to know that they were looking for Tolstoy. And that made him kind of an asshole back in the day. My kind of asshole, of course. The crux of the matter is that Meno thinks he knows the essence of virtue, but through Socrates using the Socratic method, a philosophical discourse technique that uses a series of questioning to guide a person's thinking on a matter, Meno comes to realize that he's not confident in his understanding of virtue at all, despite thinking he was teaching the concept correctly to his students. This frustrates him and he becomes more than miffed with Socrates, like most people that have these philosophical discussions with Socrates do. Here's one of my favorite excerpts from the dialogue. This is Meno speaking. "Oh Socrates, I used to be told before I knew you that you were always doubting yourself and making others doubt, and now you are casting your spells over me, and I am simply getting bewitched and enchanted, and am at my wit's end. In your power over others, you seem to be very like the flat torpedo fish who torpifies those who come near him and touch him. As you have now torpified me, I think. I do not know how to answer you, and though I have been delivered of an infinite variety of speeches about virtue before now, and to many persons, and very good ones they were, as I thought at this moment, I cannot even say what virtue is. That's Meno's after getting questioned through the Socratic method. In this moment of humility, Socrates is able to talk Meno's down from his high horse and ask the question pivotal to the learner's paradox. How can you search for something if you don't even know what that something is? Socrates then proceeds to explain his theory of recollection to Meno, that learning is a process of remembering. Ideas aren't formed de novo or fully formed. Ideas come from rediscovering things about the world that you already knew. Today, the closest thing to that would be considered intuition. To Socrates, knowledge and understanding are innate things that can be teased out by each and every person simply willing to go through the process of searching. He picks out one of Meno's young slaves just to illustrate the point. Sorry, this is still ancient Greece. Socrates guides the slave with no formal education through several Euclidean geometric proofs relevant to squares by simply asking him a series of questions in the same way he did with Meno. Socrates is illustrating to Meno that knowledge can be teased out and not just imposed on a person, and the dialogue ends without some firm conclusion about what virtue is. Okay, so why am I wasting your time with these decrepit desert diatribes? Two very important concepts that I've talked about on this channel before are relevant to this dialogue: goal-oriented thinking and process-oriented thinking. Goal-oriented thinking generally is a focus on specific goals or outcomes. Duh. In the health and fitness space, it typically refers to more superficial things like lose 30 pounds, get a six-pack, make my ex-wife regret our divorce, etc. You're focused purely on the outcomes of some process you seek to engage in to guide and impel you all the way through said process. Now, when I say superficial, that may lead some to think that there's something inherently wrong with goal-oriented thinking, and there isn't. There isn't anything wrong with having superficial goals either, but more on that later. Process-oriented thinking, on the other hand, emphasizes the process itself above whatever it aims to achieve. It doesn't necessarily value the process more than the goal, but emphasizes it more in terms of focus. Very important distinction. So if we're talking about working out and or training, we're talking about maintaining focus on the quote-unquote here and nows of the project, the weekly, daily, hourly steps required to lose 30 pounds, get a six-pack, or mend broken relationships. The micros instead of the macros. You're not thinking about hitting the bullseye on the target as much as you're thinking about your stance being shoulder-width apart, properly nocking the arrow, making sure your bow hand is properly relaxed when hooking and gripping the string, using the back and shoulder muscles when drawing the bow, anchoring the string near the corner of the mouth, looking down the arrow shaft when aiming, properly relaxing your fingers for the release, and allowing your drawing hand to move back freely after release for proper follow-through. If the arrow deviates wide and punctures a small and irritating child and the target is unscathed, consider that an unexpected bonus, I guess. Now, you're probably thinking at this point, surely one is better than the other, right? And the answer is, of course, it depends. Having goals is absolutely vital. They are essential to getting into better health and better shape, but they should be more of a North Star or guiding light rather than the sole propeller. It's about finding the right balance. You shouldn't have one without the other. It's a proper yin and yang or peanut butter and jelly relationship, as long as jelly's the breadwinner.
Rare footage of Daigo actually angry. Just its turtle style. Overcome Rao. Now on the verge of putting Daigo down 1-0.
Okay, so we've gone from Play-Doh to Planet Fitness. How is knowing about these ideas useful for your day-to-day? For those that don't know, I'm really into fighting games. I see a lot of parallels between playing fighting games well and getting into better health and better shape, but mostly in the importance of ensuring that in the ratio of goal versus process-oriented learning, you're skewing more towards the latter than the former. I'll call it being process-oriented dominant. Playing fighting games is a winner-take-all, zero-sum affair. you gain as much as the other person loses. You're forced to take accountability for your losses and weaknesses as a player if you want any chance at improving, which is great, but can lead to issues with mental health if you don't develop a certain degree of resilience. There's no teammates you can blame your losses on or help you to show up your weaknesses as a player. If you're too outcome-oriented while you're playing a fighting game, you're going to have a bad time. That's why fighting games are considered such a difficult genre of game to play, and they remain relatively niche despite the novel popularity of Street Fighter II in the 90s. The average person is particularly outcome-oriented, especially when playing video games, since the goal is to win, right? Especially against another human being. As a result, for the average person, losing is often very bruising to the ego and can be excessively frustrating in terms of the experience, when if instead, people approached each match with a more process-oriented mindset, they would understand how losing is actually winning and enjoy the experience of improving at the games more. The best players of fighting games such as Tekken or Street Fighter, even when they're playing in a tournament worth thousands of dollars, are not focused on the outcome of any one particular match during their top 8 runs. They're focusing on coming opponents in a robust bracket, what each opponent in that bracket likes to do in X situations, and what their various levels of responses might be in those situations, in the moment and focused entirely on the most immediately relevant details. Fighting games are fast-paced chess matches, and any player at a high level focused on a particular moment from a previous match, the victory screen, the prize pool or the trophy, or whether or not they forgot to turn the stove off before they flew out to Japan, is losing the match almost guaranteed. Being process-oriented dominant is a principle very easy to forget, but so integral to success, not just in fighting games, but life, which is why the genre and the community that surrounds it has such a valuable place in my heart until this day. Someone else might use meditation, music, or traditional sports. I use fighting games to stay rooted in the mindset I care deeply about as part of my lifestyle. We all want to win. We all want and deserve success. But you can't let the allure and charisma associated with victory blind you from the fact that winning requires some losing. Hopefully, I've successfully related how important understanding the difference between a goal-oriented and a process-oriented mindset is when embarking on a health and fitness journey and helping you overcome the so-called learner's paradox. Many people suffer from majoring in the minors and paralysis by analysis. The bottomless void that is the social media and influencer space makes this even worse, especially with the whole growingly quiche science-based lifting and/or living approach being favored by slipshod and unselective social media algorithms these days, offering absurd varieties of essentially the same overcomplicated slop just to feed monetization schemes. People feel like they don't know what they don't know, so they're better off not doing anything at all, or sticking to generally stale patterns of behavior they're comfortable with, such as running or walking on a treadmill, which, to be clear, is obviously much better than doing nothing at all. It's just that the average person tends to need much more. Health and fitness are not about finding the chimerical and deceitful overall best program or best exercise or best diet or influencer, and anyone scrolling through their phone searching for such things, I can assure you, is failing. It's about engaging in the process itself and having the right mindset while doing that. Being too goal-oriented, more often than not, places you in some very well-esteemed handcuffs and can lead to burnout, or crashing out as kids call these days. It can be overly frustrating and cause one to quit when things get rough, and things always get rough. Yes, success requires goal setting, but what happens if and when life happens? And if you aren't able to lose 30 pounds in 6 weeks with your crash diet because vacations, holidays, and other social events threw you off your game for a little while? Do you just give up? Because that's usually what people do, and they typically never find their footing as a result. No one's perfect, and we often fail to give ourselves grace when chasing our ideals. It's totally okay to want the best and even more. As Emerson so gracefully puts it, we aim above the mark to hit the mark. But you can't forget that ideals are just ideals, eidolons of the mind, that are like a receding horizon that inspires and guides us, but will never bless your fingertips with its touch. I personally quit things that I've loved before because I was too goal-oriented. As I said, no one is perfect. My history with jumping rope is the perfect example, though. Jumping rope is my favorite form of cardiovascular activity. I've been jumping rope for almost as long as I've been working out now, but there was a good period of about 2 to 3 years where I quit jumping rope altogether because there was this one trick that I just could not land properly. It was called the mick. The mick is a trick where you release one side of the rope handle with one hand spin the handle in midair on one side, catch it, and jump it. I practice this trick every single session. Sometimes I devote hours to it when I had time. After almost 10 years, I just couldn't get it. It just didn't make sense to me. Usually anything I could set my mind to, I could do. Why was this different? Am I a fraud? Getting old? Brain damaged? What's worse, to actual jump rope professionals, the make is considered a level 1 trick. When I learned this, my ego just couldn't handle it. As someone that wanted to find the proper balance between getting good cardio in a time-efficient manner, but doing a form of cardio that I enjoyed, I told myself that I couldn't enjoy jumping rope if there was something I wanted to do with the rope that I couldn't do. I became frustrated with the entire idea of jumping rope and decided it was becoming a waste of my increasingly limited time. So I dropped the jump rope entirely for just jogging outside more. I've never really quit anything before, so the feeling was upsetting to me. I felt like I had just dropped off an adopted child at a supermarket in the parking lot and just drove off because they drew on the walls or something. But then I came across the idea of being process oriented. Unfortunately, I can't recall from where. I started thinking that just practicing the trick could be considered a workout in and of itself if I just kept the intensity of my movements at the right level. Also, instead of just purely focusing on landing the mic every session, I could just focus on practicing it at certain moments when I'm taking a breather and or before I fully get into the cardio aspect of the routine properly. Basically just have fun with the idea of trying to do something I couldn't. I stopped caring so much about whether or not I landed the trick and focused more on getting the more important fundamental enjoyment of just moving my body through space in a way that I enjoyed. I'd been running outside for almost a decade at that point, but I honestly started to hate it. So if I got the trick, great. If I never get it, that's cool too. After just a few days of approaching the problem with this mindset, I started having breakthroughs executing the trick. I didn't fully get it until several weeks afterwards, but the mindset itself brought the fun back in the jumping rope for me to the point where I stopped jogging outside cold turkey and I never looked back. My mix still sucks in comparison to the professionals, but that's okay. I'll get there when I get there, if I get there. Part of the fun is not knowing. What's more important is finding enjoyment in moving through space, because that's the only way I'll be consistent with cardiovascular activity. I decided to apply the same mindset to a calisthenics movement called the front lever as well. Actually one of the harder movements in calisthenics, and of course one of the first things I tried doing when I started calisthenics all those years ago, because with the calisthenics discipline, for some reason, you always try to run before you crawl. Despite a lot of training and focus, I didn't start making significant progress in the movement and getting the full variation until I stopped placing such heavy burdens on myself. Like, are you truly a calisthenics athlete if you can't even hold a full front lever? It was incredibly toxic and stupid. I was competing with others on social media, which became a distraction, let my goal-oriented thinking become dominant when I should only be competing with myself and focusing on my own journey, my own process. I've now finally started making steps towards one of the movements that originally got me into the discipline after stalling for years. Skewing the ratio towards being more process-oriented makes you more adaptive and resilient. If you just adopt the basic principle of progressive overload, that your exercises need to be progressively more challenging to continue seeing progress, whether it be resistance training, cardiovascular activity, or even nutrition, you don't need to know anything to start. You just continue to work at the level that's appropriate for you. Progressive overload alone will help feed your curiosity and guide you, because it will compel you to find new ways to challenge yourself and keep things interesting in a way that's appropriate for your own level. Progressive overload and the process-oriented mindset essentially go hand in hand. You just take the first step, even if it's a small one, and recognize that experimentation is part of learning and that experiments more often than not fail. Failure is a part of the process. If a workout routine doesn't feel good, adjust it. If you don't like a particular exercise, drop it like an ugly child. Ask the right questions. It's not what's the best workout in general, but what workout and what movements do I actually enjoy and am willing to engage with. It's not about the best diet, but foods that are conducive to your body composition goals that you find the most enjoyable. How do you make those fit? Coaching is valuable as well, but run for the hills if a coach is making too many absolute statements. A good coach like Socrates will often use the Socratic method to help guide you through your journey, not by imposing standards that don't address your particular circumstances in any way. I can guarantee you that any influencer or person at the gym or a local park with a physique and or set of skills that you admire did not follow someone else's program, but were willing to go through their own process of anamnesis that was guided by getting coaching, sure, but also their own experimentation and intuitions. Getting in better health and better shape is not some vending machine where you insert a coin, press B2, and a slimmer waistline and a 300-pound bench press drops into a pickup box wrapped in a flush consumer packaging, though who knows what the future will bring. For now, you'll have to deal with not being forced but willing to show up with the right mindset. Have a crappy workout, get sore, ask questions, fall out of a handstand in the middle of the park or gym, ask more questions, fail a set of squats, ask more questions, fail at your diet, ask more questions, rinse and repeat, all while rediscovering yourself in the process. In the dialogue before Meno started his conversation with Socrates, Minos was certain he knew what virtue was. He was even paid to give lectures about the subject at a variety of institutions. But it wasn't until Socrates illustrated to him that he didn't understand virtue that he was convinced he needed to continue his search. Imagine being a philosopher, the word meaning lover of knowledge in Greek, and realizing you've been providing false knowledge. Whoops. That's like your brain skipping leg day. Minos was blinded by his goal of searching for virtue to the point that it never occurred to him to consider a more fundamental question: what is virtue? Despite this, Minos was happy to be alleviated of his ignorance because now he has a chance to actually find the truth about virtue. His prior misplaced confidence doomed his journey from the start until he ran into Socrates. Fortunate for him. For the last time, goals are deeply important when getting into better health and better shape, but don't let them blind you from focusing on the process. Finding enjoyment in that process and asking more important, more fundamental questions that might address any roadblocks that you will eventually run into. Goals are the lighthouse when you're lost at sea. The process is the oars and the compass that keep you paddling if and when the lighthouse is obscured by fog. That's all for today. I swear to goodness, I don't want these to be this long. I'm gonna be better at that. If you're looking for some guidance on your journey of health and fitness recollection, business contact info is in the description. If you want to help me make more videos faster, Patreon link is down below. Laters.